Welcome to the next installment in my video lecture series in economics. And in this particular video lecture, I'm going to be taking a look at price ceiling and price floor. In the previous video, we looked at a market equilibrium and why markets have a tendency to move towards equilibrium. What we're going to look at here is, for example, government intervention setting prices in a particular market. Either setting the price below the equilibrium or setting the price above the equilibrium, and the impact on that particular market. As always, I try to give appropriate attribution to any information that I give, and this particular slide gives the information for any quotes that appear in this particular video lecture. As always, we have to look at a few terms. What is a price ceiling? It is a maximum price that sellers may charge for a good, and this is usually set by the government. And we're looking at a price floor, which is a minimum price below which exchange is not permitted. And the key thing to remember about both of these is that a price ceiling has to be below the equilibrium price, and a price floor has to be above the equilibrium price. But we'll go over that in a little more detail. So just as a refresher, remember, we're going to start here at a market in equilibrium. So a market is in equilibrium when quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. And graphically, that is where the supply and demand curves intersect one another. So that gives us the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price where the supply and demand curves intersect one another. As I said previously, the price ceiling is going to be below the equilibrium price. So we are going to, as a reminder, we have the price ceiling, a maximum price that sellers may charge for a good. So we set the price ceiling at this amount here. We follow that price to the supply curve and down. That gives us the quantity supplied. And we follow the price all the way over to the demand curve, and that gives us the quantity demanded. So the price ceiling, as you can see here, is below the equilibrium price. If it's not below the equilibrium price and it's above the equilibrium price, the price ceiling is meaningless because the equilibrium price is what's going to exist in the marketplace. So make sure you remember that a price ceiling, to be effective, has to be below the equilibrium price. And by doing this, what the government is doing is actually causing a shortage. By setting the price below equilibrium, the government is causing excess demand or a shortage in the marketplace. Now, there's many examples of this. One of the most famous ones that occurs in the United States in the early 1970s. OPEC embargoed the United States and refused to sell oil to the United States. So there's a dramatic increase in the supply of oil to the United States, which drove gasoline prices upward. And in order to combat this, the federal government set a price ceiling, a maximum price on gasoline. So what this ended up doing, even though it lowered price below the equilibrium price after the OPEC oil embargo, there was not enough gasoline around to satisfy the demands of consumers at the price that the government set the per gallon price of gasoline at. So the issue here is that the government was circumventing the market process of rationing by prices, where if you can afford to buy it, you do buy it. All right? So price itself is a rationing mechanism. All right? I would like to buy a Lamborghini, but I can't afford to buy a Lamborghini because the price is too high. So the price itself in the market is what is the rationing mechanism. And we want to take a look at a few things that distribution mechanisms that could be put in place, non-pricing mechanisms that allow for distribution of goods when there is excess demand or a shortage of a particular product. And here are a few examples of non-pricing mechanisms. Queuing. Waiting in line is a means for distributing goods and services. This occurred during the OPEC oil embargo because people had to wait in line in order to purchase gasoline. Some people would get up hours before a gas station would open in order to get in line and ensure themselves of getting the gasoline that they needed. And if you ever see any pictures, you can go on the internet and see pictures of lines and lines of cars waiting to try and get gasoline. So that's one method, forcing people to line up and wait for the good or service when there's not enough of that good or service available at the price ceiling. Another mechanism is favored customers, people who receive special treatment from dealers during situations of excess demand. So, for example, during this time period, I full well know I was a young kid at the time, but my father was friends with people who owned gas stations, and he was insured of getting gasoline because he was friends with the gas station owners. So he could go and get gasoline if he wanted. He could go and pull up in front of everybody else and receive gasoline because he was friends with the individuals. As you might imagine, if your relative owned a gas station, they might allow you to get gasoline in front of everybody else and not have to queue for it. So you have favored customers who get preferential treatment and don't have to queue with everybody else. And a final mechanism that's non-pricing for the distribution of goods and services is ration coupons. And this occurred in the United States during World War II, where people would get coupon books to allow them to buy gasoline, sugar, any number of other products that they needed during the wartime shortages. So a ration coupon is a ticket or coupons that entitle individuals to purchase a certain amount of a product per month. So you would get this coupon book for gasoline, and each one represented a gallon of gasoline. So if you bought 5 gallons of gasoline, you'd have to pay for it and give 5 coupons. Once you ran out of the coupons, you couldn't buy any more gasoline. Same thing for sugar and other products in the United States during World War II. The other thing that we're going to take a look at is the price floor. And as a reminder, a price floor is a minimum price below which exchange is not permitted. Some of these examples are price floors, for example, in some states for milk, where the state allows a minimum price to be charged. The price has to be at this level and not below that. So realize that this does and still exists. I believe Pennsylvania still has a price floor on milk to ensure a minimum price for dairy farmers. So with the price floor has to be above the equilibrium price, and we follow the same process we did for the other ones. We follow the price floor over to what we hit first, which is the demand curve, and that tells us the quantity demanded. And if we continue with that price over to the supply curve and down, that gives us the quantity supplied. And in doing this, the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded because the price floor is above the equilibrium price. And this causes excess supply or a surplus. And remember that the price floor has to be above the equilibrium price. If it's below the equilibrium price, then the equilibrium price is what's going to exist in this particular market. So make sure you're comfortable with this notion, again, what an equilibrium is and what a price floor and a price ceiling are. We oftentimes see these as part of public policy debates. For example, rent control or minimum wage will be considered price floors. The minimum wage law is a price floor and the rent control rates are a price ceiling. So realize that these are often parts of public policy debate in the United States.